remarkable. Sometimes in the Berkeley campus, bureaucracy actually works. I shouldn't have put that on the tape, should I? Okay, if marginal revenue is greater than marginal cost, then we want to increase the quantity. And when we do so, we're going to get more profits, more total profits. In contrast, if marginal revenue is less than marginal cost, then it's in our best interest to reduce the quantity. And reducing the quantity will raise our total profits. So let's look at our earlier exercise and fill out the information with regard to what was missing when we looked at the total revenues that Alan told us what the total revenues were. Now let's presume that these are our total costs for each of the quantities that are listed in the left column, 0 through 5. Okay, so profits are easily computed. We can also compute, as we saw in the last lecture, the marginal cost, which is nothing more than the incremental cost of moving from 0 to 1. The difference between this is 4. From 9 to 15, the difference there is 6. 15 to 23, the difference there is 8. 23 to 33, the difference there is 10. That's our marginal cost, right? And our profits are simply the difference between total revenue and total cost. And I've listed all of those in the fourth column here, which is just taking the difference between total revenue and total cost. And the change in profits that emerges every time we look at moving the quantity that we're going to produce from one unit to another is here in the last column. And all I've done here is taken the difference between the computed marginal revenue, which is constant because I'm a price taker, and it's constant at $10. The marginal cost varies in accordance with the quantity that I'm producing, and thus this is our change in profits. And at what point will profits be maximized? With regard to this table, at what point, and in general, what point? Yes?
When marginal cost equals marginal revenue?
Yeah, that's going to be our decision. And it's also, for those of you who feel comfortable with calculus, it's also taking the first derivative of profit and setting it equal to 0 and solving for the unknown quantity, right? Okay, so for any quantity with marginal revenue greater than marginal cost, my incentive is to increase the quantity that I am producing. And that's certainly true here until we reach a quantity of either 3 or 4. The profit curve becomes flat at 3 and 4, right? At any quantity with marginal revenue less than marginal cost, we want to move in the opposite direction. Particularly if we were producing 5 units here, we would not be maximizing profits, and in our best interest to reduce the quantity that we're offering to the market. Okay, marginal cost and firm supply decision. Coming back to the willingness to sell that we discussed 2 lectures ago, what I have in this particular graph is on the horizontal axis the quantity that's being introduced or produced by the firm. The vertical axis is the costs that are incurred, and what I have in terms of the relationship is looking at the marginal cost curve. Right? Now, as Shinoa said, the decision rule is when marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. Moreover, in a competitive marketplace, marginal revenue is equal to price. So the decision rule then in a competitive marketplace is every firm should be setting price equal to its marginal cost. Right? If the supply curve is the marginal cost of producing the good, then I don't have to go back and look at the decision rule, marginal revenue or price equals to marginal cost. All I have to do is go to this particular curve. This gives me my marginal cost. All you have to do is tell me the price. I go to the curve and tell you what quantity will maximize total profits. Right? Okay, so if the price is P1 and the marginal revenue is in fact P1, then if I was producing just QA, I would not be maximizing profits. Why? Because at that particular quantity, the marginal revenue is above the marginal cost. Hence, it's in my interest to move beyond QA and produce more. And I continue in that pursuit, and all the while I'll be increasing or raising my total profits. In contrast, suppose the starting position that I was producing QB. Now, this would be too much quantity because at this particular quantity, the actual incremental cost that I'm incurring is larger than the incremental revenue that I'm going to capture when I sell the quantity. Hence, it's now in my interest to reduce the amount of quantity that I'm offering to the market because in doing so, I will raise my profits. And only at the point of Q1, where marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue is equal to price, will I be maximizing profits. Any change from Q1 will lower my profits. Okay? Hence the decision rule, marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost at the profit maximizing Q. In addition, if I know what the marginal cost curve is, and you give me the price, I can tell you immediately what is the quantity that I should be producing that will maximize my profits, right? Because the supply curve is the marginal cost for different quantities, levels of quantity. Right? Okay. Now, suppose the price rises to P2. As I just indicated, all I have to do is go to this marginal cost curve and see for that particular price, what is the quantity that will be maximizing profits at the price P2. And it will be in my interest now to expand the quantity that I'm producing from Q1 to Q2. And as I've indicated, the marginal cost curve determines the firm's quantity at any particular price. Hence, surprise, surprise, the marginal cost curve is the firm's supply curve. Okay? You change the price, and that curve is going to tell you what quantity will be forthcoming at that new price. And moreover, lying behind that is the fact that we're presuming that the firm is in the business of maximizing its profits. Okay? Okay, under what conditions will a firm shut down or exit from the industry? And as I indicated at the outset of today's lecture, a short-run decision not to produce anything is simply setting Q equal to 0. An exit, in contrast, is that the company is no longer in that business, and they've left that industry or left that market. That's the distinction between shut down and exit. Or another way of putting it, it's possible for a firm to shut down this period, but be in business the following period. Right? However, if a firm exits, it doesn't have that option of producing some positive quantity in some subsequent period. right? Okay, so if a firm shuts down in the short run, the presumption is it still has to pay its fixed cost. Take our example in the last lecture about Farmer Jack. Suppose Farmer Jack enters into a contract to lease, what was the price on the land? Was it $2,000? Pardon? Okay, it's $1,000. It's $1,000 per month. And Farmer Jack has signed a 2-year contract to pay $1,000 per month for 5 acres, right? For 5 acres. Now, if Farmer Jack decides to produce no wheat, he still has to honor that contract, right? So that is a fixed cost. And we also, in our presentation for the illustrative example for Farmer Jack, that was a fixed cost. But if he decides to produce no wheat, which is a quantity of 0, which would be consistent with a shutdown, he still has to pay the fixed cost, right? And if he fails to do so, what would happen to him? Bring a little bit of reality into our discussion. Exactly. The person leasing the land to him would bring a legal action for breach of contract. And given how well the court system here in the United States functions, it would take only 7 or 8 years before the landlord collected the $1,000 that was due him. Okay. In the long run, that fixed cost can be avoided as well. Because in the long run, remember in the long run, everything's flexible, right? There is no fixed cost. So if you decide to exit the industry, you're going to save your variable cost as well as what was in the short run, your fixed cost. Okay. A firm's short run decision to shut down. Now let me tell you where I'm going here. What we've just discovered is that the marginal cost curve is the firm's short run supply curve, right? But what we're going to discover now is only a portion of that supply curve, because there's segments on that supply curve where it doesn't make sense to produce anything, right? And we have to understand what portion of that short run supply curve or that marginal cost curve is not the decision of what a firm would do when prices change. Because if prices change and they move downward, that short run marginal cost curve is not going to give you the right answer. Okay? You all know where I'm going now? Okay. The cost of shutting down, what do you lose? You lose whatever total revenue could be generated by the market price times the quantity that you sold. So you lose the total revenue. The benefit of shutting down is that you don't have any variable costs, right? So all the variable costs will be avoided. But you still have to, in the short run, pay the fixed cost. So one should shut down if the total revenue is less than the total variable cost. That's what those first 2 points imply, and it's common sense, right? Now, if we divide both sides of that prior statement, namely shut down when total revenue is less than total variable cost, and now we've recomputed that and we're looking at average revenue versus average variable cost. Once again, if average revenue is less than average variable cost, the decision rule for the firm should be to shut down. Okay? And since average revenue is the price in a competitive marketplace, the result of this logic is that a firm should shut down if the price that that firm would receive by selling his goods or her goods, if that's less than its average variable cost, they should shut down and produce 0. Okay? What does this look like graphically? And now coming back to my point about you can't just look at the entire supply curve, because a segment of that supply curve should not drive the rule about the quantity that you're going to produce. All right. Let's look at the segment of the marginal cost curve, or what we've represented up until now as being the short-run supply curve, that portion that is above the average variable cost. Here's your ending point on the marginal revenue. It's all the way from this point down to the average variable cost. Okay? Now, if the price that's available to this firm in the marketplace is below its average variable cost, then we shouldn't look at the marginal cost curve for this particular segment and say, okay, all we have to do is come down here and find the quantity for that segment. No, because for that segment, when price is below average variable cost, it should be 0. Okay? So the only portion of the marginal cost curve that's relevant in terms of telling us how the firm will respond to different prices is this segment of the marginal cost curve beginning at the average variable cost all the way out here. We can use that portion of the curve. We can't use the portion that's below average variable cost because it will give us the wrong answer. Okay? And I'm stating here graphically what I just said, namely that the firm's short-run supply curve is that portion of its marginal cost curve above the average variable cost. Okay? How many of us have walked into a retail outlet 1 week and found them operating, and 3 weeks later have gone back and found them not operating? Well, it's very likely something along these lines has happened. They sat down and figured out what their average variable cost is and what the price of the goods that they're selling, and suddenly realized it didn't make any sense to leave their doors open. Okay? I'm sure there are lots of other motivations, but at least that's one straightforward economic reason for why they're no longer providing those services. Okay, the irrelevance of sunk cost. Sunk cost, the cost that's already been committed and cannot be recovered. That's how we're going to define it. As we noted, I believe in the first lecture, sunk costs are irrelevant with regard to decisions that are being made at the margin. You have to pay them regardless of whatever decisions you might make. Those are decisions that have already taken place previously. Right? Fixed cost is a sunk cost. There are other costs that are sunk cost as well. If a pharmaceutical company, invests in the discovery of some new pharmaceutical agent, some new API, and they get a patent for that API, and then you get 6 years down the road, and they're deciding about the amount of that drug that should be produced for the marketplace, those costs that were incurred in research and development to make that discovery are sunk at that point. Right? Does that make sense? Okay. But fixed costs are also a sunk cost in the sense that the firm must pay those costs whether it produces or shuts down, like our example with regard to land for Farmer Jack. So the fixed costs don't matter in the decision to shut down. Now let's look at a firm's long-run decision with regard now not with respect to shutting down, but exiting the industry and no longer having the option to produce a positive quantity at some future period. Okay? Once again, the loss is going to be the total revenue. The benefit of exiting the market is going to be the cost savings. Now it's just not total variable cost, but instead it's total fixed cost, because in the long run, you can avoid the fixed cost as well. Coming back to the simple example about Farmer Jack who signed a 2-year contract for land, when he gets to the first month of year 3, there is no contract, right? So he can avoid those costs by shutting down, exiting, and no longer producing wheat. So now the firm will exit when total revenues are less than total costs. Once again, if we divide both sides by Q, we get the firm decision rule, namely it will exit when price in the long run is less than average total cost, not average variable cost as existed for the shutdown decision in the short run. Okay? Okay, what about the opposite? Not just exiting, but what about the decision to enter the industry or enter this marketplace? A new firm evaluating whether to enter. Now, in the long run, a new firm will enter the market if it's profitable to do so. And it will only be profitable to do so if total revenue is greater than total cost. Right? So, once again, if we divide both sides by Q, the entry decision is if price is above average total cost, that should invite and create incentives for new entrants. Now, a competitive firm supply curve. We've already established that in the short run, that supply curve is the marginal cost curve with what additional qualifications? Given what we've just discussed, what are the additional qualifications? Don't everybody jump up at once. Yes. Right, so it is the marginal cost curve, but only for that portion that is above the average variable cost. No, short run. I'm sorry, who said? No, not yet, short run. Yeah, but you're quite right. He's taken us one step beyond, and that one step beyond is we're looking at the long run. That long run curve is the supply curve if and only if price is above average total cost. Okay. And that is the message that's on this particular slide, namely when the firm's long run supply curve is that portion of its marginal cost above the long run average total cost. So the actual representation for the supply curve is that for prices over this entire range, the quantity that's going to be produced by this firm is 0. And as soon as the price gets to this particular point, then we come all the way over to the marginal cost curve, and then for prices above that, that becomes the relevant supply curve. All right? Okay, let's take an active learning example. Looking at this particular learning example, and by the way, I want you to visit with your neighbors and draw it graphically. And if you find it less than totally transparent, I strongly recommend that you do it a number of times, practicing between here and the midterm. Okay, go ahead. Determine the firms from this particular graph for a price of 10 and an average total cost of $6. What is the firm's profits? Graphically. Can I borrow your pen for just 1 second? Thank you. Okay, we got it? Juliet, what's the answer? It's 200. Tell me how you got there graphically. Right. So that's your profits. And graphically, what area is represented by that computation of 200? Exactly.